So, Matt, the other day, my friend had a peekaboo accident.
A peekaboo accident?
Yeah.
What's a peekaboo accident?
It's one that's bad enough to put you in the ICU.
Oh, my God.
Worth it. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Graveyard. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Adam.
And my name's Matt.
Now, pull up a tombstone or settle into your casket and get comfortable because this is Graveyard Tales. All right, everybody, here we are again. Matt, how you doing tonight, brother?
Hey, I'm good, man.
Good deal. So before we get into it, I want to say go check out the Podbelly Network at podbelly.com. You can go there and find a list of shows that we're proud to be associated with and proud to be members of the Podbelly Network. You might find a show on there that you wouldn't run across any other way, so go over to podbelly.com and check them out. They've also got tips and tricks on how to start a podcast and record and stuff if you're interested in that. While you're on the internet doing your looking around and stuff, go over to patreon.com/graveyard tales and sign up to become a patron. We've got 3 different levels, and we try to do a bonus episode every week. Plus our $10 a month patrons, they get the video versions of us recording these episodes. So you get to see the mistakes, the mess ups, sometimes when we start laughing at something stupid or one of the dogs does something in the background that I would normally cut out of the audio, it'll stay in the video for the patrons. And recently, the patronage has become very important to us. We mentioned it before, but we had some equipment failure. And if we did not have you patrons, we wouldn't be able to keep the show going. So you literally are the reason that Graveyard Tales is still going.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It wasn't catastrophic, but it almost became that way.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you guys are the reason we do this, and you're the ones that are pushing us through. And Adam's right. We would have been in danger of missing more than a few deadlines had it not been for your donations.
Right.
So, we sincerely appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. So if you want to get our attempt at a thank you, because it's not ever going to be enough, go over there and check out our videos and stuff that we put up on patreon.com/graveyard tales. Also, if you want to give us a rate and review on whatever podcast app you're listening to, iTunes helps the most, but go over there and give us a 5-star review and say something. It helps if you say a little something. You don't have to, but we do appreciate it. All right, y'all. So let me tell you about the latest true crime podcast that I can't stop listening to, and that's Morning Cup of Murder. Now, you remember those desktop calendars that would tell you about what happened on that day in history? Well, Morning Cup of Murder took that idea and they turned it into a daily podcast that now has over 850 episodes that go into serial killers, cults, cold cases, murders, and more. Morning Cup of Murder is the best way to start your day because each episode is less than 10 minutes long, so it's perfect to sit and listen to while you're having your first cup of coffee in the morning, or as our UK friends do, their first cup of tea in the morning. Now, Morning Cup of Murder can be heard anywhere you listen to podcasts, so check out Morning Cup of Murder today. Now, Matt, that's all I've got. So, why don't you tell us? What are we talking about tonight, brother?
Well, tonight we've got a very special guest coming on. I think this is going to be enjoyable for all of you listeners. This is something I've never experienced anything quite like this before or seen anything. we are going to have Josh Werner as our special guest tonight. The cool thing about Josh is that he writes and publishes a comic book based on the Winchester Mystery House.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, not something I would ever think about. Is somebody actually creating a I guess maybe it's a graphic novel.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't really know the difference. But the illustrations are amazing. Adam and I both have a copy. It's really cool. The stories are fantastic. And Josh is going to talk to us tonight about, how he came up with the idea, working with Winchester Mystery House and the folks there. And hopefully he's going to have some fantastic factoids that we may not have covered in our show about the Winchester Mystery House.
Right. It's cool that he got to work there with the staff and the house. So I'm looking forward to talking to him about what he experienced and if he experienced anything there. And just introducing you guys to another writer and artist so you can go check out his stuff. I know Michael loves it because Michael's an aspiring artist, so he loves the artwork in there, and it's one of those things where you don't see often graphic novels or comics done on the topics that we discuss.
Right.
You do about, there's vampires, or you do about, here's a ghost, but you don't about stuff like the Winchester Mystery House. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So sit back and enjoy our talk tonight with Josh Werner.
All right, everybody. So here is the guest that we have been teasing to you. We're super excited about this interview that we've got with Josh here. So, Josh, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself and let everybody know what you do?
Awesome. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Werner. I am the Chief Creative Officer of Oxeye Media, which is a big media company that owns SourcePoint Press. SourcePoint Press is a comic and book and graphic novel publishing company, and I'm also the editor-in-chief of that company. And I founded that company 10 years ago this year. And on top of that, I'm also a writer and an illustrator. So I do a lot of I write a lot of books and comic books. And my current series is the Winchester Mystery House, and it has been a wild ride writing this series. I'm absolutely loving it.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah. So, Josh, what drew you to the Winchester Mystery House? I mean, there's dozens of places you could have chosen to do something like this, but Adam and I were talking about in the intro. We've never seen anything quite like, a series like this for a specific location. So, I mean, what led you to go, we could do an entire series on this one place?
So I've been really, really into the history and the lore surrounding this house for a long time, and I've read articles in all those top 10 haunted places magazines that it always stood apart from some of the other ones because it had such a unique storyline and it was on such a bigger scope than any one that has like a particular tragedy. And I always found it fascinating, and I watched a lot of documentaries about it and kind of started deep diving on my research with it. And one day I was talking with one of our game designers. We also have a board game division. And we had published a game called Floor Plan. And Floor Plan is a game where you are designing houses and architecture to specifically meet clients' needs that pop up in the game. So you're competing against other, construction companies to try to win the gig by designing the perfect house. And we were chatting, and he said, he lives in California, and he said, have you ever heard of the Winchester Mystery House? I was like, yeah, of course. I absolutely have. He's like, wouldn't it be cool if we did a whole new version of this game, and that version was specific to that house, and you were working for Sarah Winchester, she was your client, and then her desires or her needs or demands for your construction would be much different, because it would be bizarre and eccentric and not always make sense, and there'd be some of the goals you'd be striving for would be specific rooms in the house. And then he's like, we could even expand upon it. We could make it, the original game was only one floor. And I'm like, well, we couldn't do just one floor in the Winchester Mystery House. It's meant to be big. And he's like, what if we figured out a way to do multiple floors in the game? And then I was like, well, what about ghosts? We'd have to include the ghosts. And he's like, wow, okay, yeah, let's take this whole new direction with this. So we put together this pitch package, and we approached the estate to talk about this game idea we had, because we were just so set on it. We're like, maybe we can make it and they can sell it in their gift shop. And throughout the conversations, they started realizing, like, wow, quite a bit about the house, and you feel really passionate about Sarah Winchester as a person. And I said, yeah, I really do. I said, one of the things that really bothers me is her portrayal, throughout time, and the way that, like, the lore has portrayed her by so many. It dates all the way back to her lifetime. While she was still alive, there was all these newspapers in San Jose were writing articles about her, like gossip columns almost, and like, oh, this insane woman, terrified of dying in horrible grief, builds crazy haunted mansion. And I mean, these are like real articles, and those stories started circling while she was still alive. And yet she was so smart, and she spoke so many languages, and so many things that she put in the house were so ahead of their time.
Yeah.
She was inventing things before they existed. And then on top of that, her wealth and her dedication to building this house, it created this mini economy. She had hundreds of people that she was paying top dollar to, that built up an entire area, which is now Silicon Valley. I have no doubt, like, the thriving success of that area all stemmed from her.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, those are the things you don't ever hear about. And they're like, wow, that's really, really cool. You have a really, really interesting take on her. And we really like that, that you're not stuck on this idea of her having some kind of mental illness. I said, I don't think it's mentally ill to have motivations that we don't necessarily understand. And that maybe we never will, fully understand her reasons for everything she did. And they asked me, so what did you think about the movie? I said, I love the movie. The movie starring Helen Mirren. I said, I especially loved Helen's performance in the film. She portrayed Sarah so awesomely. And I said, but in my opinion, it kind of barely scratched the surface. And she was building this house for decades. You skipped about 30 years of story of crazy things that she did and things she had to battle and what she had to go up against when she was building this house. You picked this one moment in time. I said, her story's, it's better told episodically throughout history.
Right.
And they said, interesting. It sounds like we might have found the right person to help tell that story. They're like, don't you run a comic publishing company? Like, well, yeah,
they did their research on you.
Right? And I was like, yeah, well, we're supposed to be here to talk about a board game, but I would absolutely love to do a comic book series. And so we ended up hitting it off, and we talked a few more times before we were signing a deal for both comic book series and the game. And being editor-in-chief and having to kind of oversee and manage all these other projects, the first thing in my forefront of my thoughts was, I would love to write this, but I can't. I just don't have the time. I got to find the right person. I got to hire the right writer for this. But the house is kind of, they made it really clear, like, well, we really like you and your vision for this and the way that you want to tell this story. We don't necessarily like somebody else. Like, you'd have to really find the right person. And I just, I never found the right person. So here we are. I just ended up doing it myself.
That's it. You start to make time for the things that you're really passionate about. That's cool. I promise I did not think that was going to be your story of how this started. Yeah,
I know.
You go in to pitch a board game, which is cool enough in and of itself. And then come out with a deal to make a comic book. Yeah, I love it.
And not just like a one-time deal either. It's like, hey, let's do this for the next couple of years. Let's break it up into chunks and let's tell the entire history of the house from starting from 1886, the day she buys it, all the way through to her death. And that's what we're gonna do. And that's a big endeavor to do right, to do well.
Oh yeah.
You know? And I'm just so glad that they took the chance on me.
Yeah. That's what I liked about the book. That first edition, I guess the first section of that you're going to be writing, the first book there. You open it up and it starts with her standing there buying the house.
Mhm.
And I like how you say, the guy says, well, isn't this too much house for you? And she's like, no. And he's like, well, what are you going to do with it? And she goes, build. And that's basically her story is, she'd had the idea of this house, and then, I've always wanted to go there. Ashley and I went to California in 2019, but we didn't get a chance to get by the Winchester Mystery House, which is kind of a bummer, but it was like many hundreds of miles from where we went. So we would have had to extended the vacation to do that. But I like, when you and I were talking prior to getting on here, you were saying it was really cool to actually get to work with those people and at the house. And I was wondering, how much time did you actually get to spend there?
So before this happened, I had never been to the house in person. I always dreamt of going. I never got the opportunity. And of course I said, well, if I'm going to be writing this, I gotta come down.
Yeah.
I need to see it. I need to walk through it. I need to feel it. And, I started doing all my research first. They were closed for a bit during the pandemic, and we had San Diego Comic-Con coming up, and San Diego decided to close. They decided to put on a big digital convention, and the house reached out to them and said, hey, we're going to be doing a comic book, and we're kind of like your neighbor, and we should really do something to talk about this and highlight this. We're working with editor-in-chief Source Point Press, and they were excited. They were like, we wish we were doing something in person and doing something live. Like, and they're like, we wish we were doing stuff live too, but right now it's all digital. So what can we put together? So the house gave me access to a 3D walkthrough of the entire mansion. It's incredible what they did. They had a photographer go through every single step and take these big wide lens photos every single possible direction, and then piece together the room seamlessly. And then you go down the hallway, and if you can see, you can literally in this 3D walkthrough, you can turn your head and see everything. And you can go further down the hallway and see these doors, and you can choose to go in these doors. It's almost like virtual reality, except it's built out of photographs.
That's
so
cool.
It's not 3D rendered. It's not an artist mock-up. It's actual photos, but you can turn your head and go places, and you can explore. And they gave me access to this. They said, start going through the house, do what you got to do. And it was mind blowing. 10 times through, I was still getting lost.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no tour guide, right? So I'm like, you have the option to do like a guided thing where they just kind of drag you through it. I'm like, no, I'm going to do it free. And I was like, I'm all turned around. I don't even know what floor I'm on anymore. So you could actually, it was incredible what they did. You could actually zoom out, you can pull out, and it'll pull you out of the house. And all the walls are stripped away. So what you're seeing is like a dollhouse from the backside. And you're like, oh, that's where I am. And then you can kind of like zip back in and then go back to walking through it. And I did this countless times, just trying to get to know my way around and try to get to feel it out.
That is so cool.
It was, right? It was really incredible. Like, given the circumstances, it was like, oh, I'm finally going to get to do this. And they're welcoming me out, and they want me there, and they can't. It was just kind of heartbreaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, while I'm doing all this, I'm starting to lay things out. We're starting to get the first issue going, and the artist starts to dive in. Dustin Irvin was my artist for the first issue. And he and I are working through this, and I'm taking screenshots of different rooms in the house and sending them to him and all this stuff, doing all this research, trying to really make it seamless for him. And San Diego asked us to start kind of documenting this. And they're like, instead of doing like a panel, they're like, let's do like a documentary about how this came to be and about why you guys are doing this, and like showing some behind the scenes of you and Dustin working on this. And we made this awesome documentary, and they debuted it at this digital con, and it was available on YouTube now to watch, and it was really fun. And then the second they opened the doors, man, I was at the house. I flew out there. I'm in Michigan. I'm pretty far away from California, and it was amazing. I got to go through everything. I didn't get to go through everything. So there's a lot of people, they've gone through the tour and they're like, yeah, that was a big house, man. It took me like an hour and a half to walk through it. And now that I've been there, and now that I've also done the 3D walkthroughs, and now that I've done all this research, I can tell you didn't see the whole house. Even if the thing is guided to make you feel like you saw the whole house, it is bigger than that.
Yeah.
And I know this for a fact because it's so big, and that they actually have all of their offices and all that stuff that they do all their business work are in the house, and you never know. You'll never see it because there's a pair of wings in the house that you don't see. It's wild to think that because it's so guided that you're like, well, you come in one end and you come out the other, just like you walk through a haunted house. But just like walking through a haunted house, there's all these different scare points where employees are and all this stuff behind the walls that you don't see. And that's kind of how it is. Like there's whole portions of it. Not to mention there's portions of it that are unsafe, that they don't open to the public because they're in disrepair. I mean, it's a Victorian era home. It takes a lot of upkeep.
Sure.
Because their version of the upkeep is so specific that they can't just go in and tear stuff down and rebuild it. To keep its historical accuracy, they got to do it piece by piece, really slowly over time. So yeah, it's even then you only see a little bit of it. But I came out and we wanted to get all the press excited about it. So like we made these. I'll show you guys one real quick. We made these letters. Sent out these mysterious envelopes, and this one doesn't have anything on it, but it would have all this contact info on it, and then people would open it up and they would see this, and this is just an invitation, and it doesn't tell you what it's for. It just says, your presence has been requested on Friday the 13th of August 2021 at 6:30 p.m. in the Carriage House at the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California. The spirits have called for you. Your skill is to be tested. And so I designed this, and it's got this. It says like Lenata Via at the bottom, like as if that's where it came from, which was the name that Sarah gave to the house. And we got people riled up. They were like, what is this? What do you mean my skills going to be tested? All this stuff. And the people who got them were posting about them on the internet, and they were trying to figure out like, well, here's what I do for a living. Like I work as a comic book reviewer at like IGN or whatever. Mm-hmm. Somebody else is like, well, I got one. And I'm a TikToker who reviews board games. And then somebody's like, well, I got one, and I work for a ghost hunting show. And somebody's like, I got one, and I just do like a supernatural podcast. And somebody's like, well, I just work for the local newspaper in San Jose. Like it was just, and it was all these different areas of the press that would be interested in the house, news about the house, news about the board game, news about the comic series. But we didn't announce the game or the comic. We just kind of brought all these people, and they showed up out of curiosity.
That's cool.
We took them into the Carriage House, which is behind it on the property. And we fed them dinner. We gave them all these little goodie bags. And then I gave like a speech, and I did a bunch of interviews and stuff like that. And we gave them all an ash can preview of the comic book. And that ash can's now, it's like super collectible. Anybody who has that same ash can. And for those who don't know, an ash can is just, it's like a shorter version it's like a preview comic book. It's used to market an upcoming comic. And they're often, they're only available in certain ways, like a subscription service, or like you had to be at a certain event. They're not something you can go to your store and buy.
Right.
So because of that, they become super collectible. And so we gave them all those, and then we had a prototype of the board game. It was our first prototype, and we let all of them play it. And then we just chatted about the house, and like we just had a really good time, and we talked about the gardens, and we looked around and all this stuff. And then at the end, it's gotten dark now. Everybody's had a really good time. They played the game. They've read the comic. They've hung out and chatted with me, and we took pictures and did video interviews. hopefully they're all armed up to go write a cool article the next day. And I said, okay, now to wrap up the night, who wants to go through the house on a private tour? And everybody was like, yeah, I'm ready. And I'm like, awesome. We've shut the power off to the house. Here's your flashlight. And about 50% of people were like, I changed my mind. Never mind. I'm out.
Oh, how that would be so amazing.
It was so fun. The 50% who did come with me, they had a blast. They loved it. And
I was going to say, I wouldn't have backed out of that opportunity. Like that's an opportunity that, to me, yeah, there's some places that we talk about that I'm like, I don't really want to be in that place after dark, and the activity there, but the Winchester house, from everything that Matt and I have learned about it, to me, there wouldn't be anything there that I'd be like, nope, I'm out, except for the potential of getting lost. But at that point, I mean, this is, we got GPS and all that stuff. I can send out a help, just text Josh, okay, I'm lost. Here's what the room looks like. Where am I?
Yeah. Or you can find one that the tube network where you can holler in there and go, hey, I'm over here.
You mentioned in the very beginning about Sarah adding stuff to the house that wasn't, like, it was ahead of its time. And that was one of the things that really struck Matt and I when we were doing our research on it, was she had an elevator.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like a big deal now, but when that house was being built, when she put it in, private homes didn't have elevators. And just to not only put the money into doing that, but just the thought of, I want an elevator in my house, is incredible. And we were really blown away with her ingenuity and her ability to design this stuff. Because I know if I build a house at some point, I would like to have secret rooms, behind bookcases, but it's based on the Winchester Mystery House and stuff like that. Yeah. She didn't have a Winchester Mystery House to look at and say, oh, I want to do that. So it just amazes me, all the stuff that she came up with. And I know there was some crazy theories that we heard about why she did it. That it was running from the spirits that were killed by her husband's guns, or, her own spirits and all that, to trick them into discombobulate them where they couldn't find her. So I was going to ask you, through your research, what have you found that makes the most sense on the reasoning behind why she built the house the way she did? Was it simply just I want to do this? And if that's the case, to me, that's good enough. But was there a reason behind her doing that, or was it just her wanting to?
So the big thing about her is she was there is a ton of mystery surrounding this. And as far as the idea of the house being, there's a mountain of evidence that there's a ton of paranormal, activity in the house. And that dates back since she was alive. So there's a mountain of evidence. Her reasons for building the house in the lore have always been super tied into that paranormal activity. And there is, I would say, just as many people out there who spend their effort, putting all this effort in trying to debunk any sort of supernatural reasons behind her actions, as there are the other direction. When in reality, and it's very easy to, I get attacked all the time when I'm like promoting the comic, and people will be like, this poor woman, look at what you all spent the past century doing this, saying this stuff. And these people don't know half as much as I do about her. Like they don't have a clue. And I hold her in the greatest esteem and the greatest respect. I idolize her. She was brilliant. And the fact that we don't necessarily know all of her motives, and all we have is little bits of information to piece it together, that's why it's called a mystery house, right? But here's what I do know. So she Um, she was a spiritualist. She did believe in ghosts. Uh, she did feel that her family had died so abruptly that there was more to it beyond illness. So, I mean, her mother-in-law, then her father-in-law, then her daughter, and then her husband. It's all happened in a pretty short amount of time.
Mhm.
And I mean, her husband barely had the company, and he was dead next. And so it is quite possible that she felt like there were supernatural reasons behind this, or that there was some sort of curse. Um, she did when she chose the house that she decided to build upon, which was nowhere near. She went from East Coast to West Coast. As to why she went to the West Coast, I'm here. I will debunk as much as what people want. There was she had family that lived out there, so like it makes absolute sense that she moved to
Right.
California. A lot of the story will go like she just started traveling west, and she didn't stop until like her husband came out of the clouds and said, "That's the
Mhm.
house." So no, of course it makes sense that she went out west for a reason, but there was something really particular about that house and that particular plot of land that she thought was absolutely perfect for her project that had to be there and nowhere else. She did feel extremely passionately about that way. And then as soon as she started building this, she had to swear her workers to secrecy. The first thing she did was put up basically a privacy fence, and she kept people out, and she destroyed all of her documents and anything and everything that had to do with the construction of the house so that no one could learn about what she was doing there,
Right.
which tells us that she wasn't just building a house for fun, right? Like, so a
Right.
lot of people are
Yeah.
like, she was just into architecture, leave her alone. No, she was definitely constructing
Mhm.
something special, something that meant the dedication of the rest of her life. And as she was, and she was so private about it, that it's interesting, a lot of what we know beyond what the town gossip was, because there's literally like I have one of the most more famous books actually written about her is written by like a neighbor down the street.
Hmm.
Like had to walk past the house every day, try to peek through the fence and go, "What's going on in there?" And like she was just this big gossip, and she would try to like peg down the workers on their way to work and like get information out of them. And honestly, a lot of what we know about why Sarah was so great and so philanthropic and all of that is from her workers breaking down under pressure and defending her.
Oh yeah.
So they would push and push and push and push, and they would be sworn to secrecy until they've had enough. And they say, you know what? You don't know the first thing about her. You don't have a clue that like she just gave a huge fortune and she opened up her hospital just specifically to try to cure tuberculosis. That she's responsible for feeding all the orphans within 100-mile radius from those miles of orchards that she has. Like those are stuff that nobody talks about, and those are her workers coming to her side. That being said, it is also there's just very documented that she was super particular about the house, that she only gave instructions one day at a time, that she did go to the seance room every night, and the seance room is one of the weirdest rooms in the whole place. That the bell tower was to notify the workers every night that she was going to the seance room not to be disturbed. Now, what she did in the seance room, we don't know. Nobody else was in there with her, but it's all the lore surrounding it, all these supernatural elements, they make perfect sense.
Yeah.
The fact that she would come out and with very, very specific instructions, the construction crews were like, they were losing their minds. They were like, why can't you give us instructions further in advance? I never know what I'm building the next day. If anything isn't perfectly to your design, you tell us we have to tear down every single bit of it. You have to tell us that we have to tear up every single board and we have to start from scratch. The workers, they got so frustrated with having to constantly do that, but they were paid so well and they were treated so well that they would do anything she said for the rest of their lives, and they did.
Yeah.
They did. They didn't leave. But they would start doing things to kind of like for example, they would hide pieces, like finished pieces, because these were so like handcrafted, beautiful elements to this house. And they would like be like, oh, we got to dismantle this, and they would like tuck them away and hide them in a shed so they could kind of use them later. Um, there's got to be a reason for that. And now here's another thing that my research really dug down to, and that's something that doesn't get talked about very much, and that is there's a lot of things in the house. And you see this in the comic book. Instead of just having Sarah in the comic book tell you, this is why I'm doing these things, this is what's going on in here, you start to kind of, it's almost to choose your own adventure. You start to hear the theories from the people in her life. You hear their perspectives. You hear what the construction crews are talking about, how they feel about what they're doing. You feel how those close to her feel about her and express to her. If there are those who are concerned for her mental well-being and her welfare, they express it. If there are those who are not, and they think that she knows exactly what she's doing, they express it. And it's up to you as a reader to decide which of these people in her life you're going to listen to the most, because that's kind of what we as regular people now have. We have these different varying opinions and these bits of information, and we kind of have to make our decisions.
Yeah,
As for
exactly.
the whole thing itself, in the comic book series, it's largely fictional. It's so that I can tell a good horror story. But every single thing else in there is true history, and a lot of the paranormal experiences people have had for the past century inspired my version of the haunting story. So it's all very, very accurate. And one of the things that people don't really talk about is that there are a lot of designs and elements in that house that point to Freemasonry. And Freemasonry and spiritualism can go hand in hand. Um, but I do think that she was so brilliant, so smart, that a lot of this house was built to be like one big puzzle that we're all meant to solve one day. And we're just not smart enough to have figured it out yet.
Right.
The house
Well,
is a Rubik's Cube.
they're still finding things, right? I mean, I know I've seen articles within the last 5 years where they found a room that
room.
they didn't know existed.
So they found a room that was completely walled off and with no entrance points at all. And this room is actually featured in volume 2, which I'm writing right now. You'll get to see what that room was like, what it was used for, and why it was sealed off in volume 2. But they discovered this room, and it wasn't just a room; it was like full of stuff. I mean, there was a Victorian era couch in there. There were dolls. There were paintings.
Wow.
There was a sewing machine. I mean, who seals off an entire room without removing the items first and saying no? It's all got to go, and it's got to go away right now. Don't touch a thing. That's incredibly mysterious. It's incredible. And so, at the time in the U.S., women weren't allowed to be Freemasons. Um, but
You're
one of the
about
things,
to hit on something I was about to ask you, so keep going down that path.
so one of the things that people don't really talk about, they talk about, say, oh, she took all this money, her family died, she took all this money from the company, and she immediately headed out west and she found this house and she started building it. But much like you'll find in the Bible, there's like just missing gaps in time. You're like,
Mhm.
well, what was Jesus doing for those years? There's a chunk of that in Sarah's story as well. And that is, there are 4 years between her having received that money and leaving her home and having arrived in California. That's a long time to get to California.
Mhm.
Uh, During that time, she took that wealth and she traveled the world, and she spent a lot of time in France. And at the time, France was the area she was staying in. Freemasonry was a pretty big deal, and her dad was a Freemason, and she had been kind of raised up in these kind of almost secret community. And in France, women were allowed to be Freemasons. I believe, even though there is no written proof of this, that she spent a lot of time with the Freemasons during her time in France. And at the time, a lot of the Freemasons were studying the work of Francis Bacon, famous philosopher.
Mhm.
I've actually personally had a big interest in Francis Bacon long before I read this comic book and long before I discovered the ties that Sarah has to Francis Bacon. You'll see in the comic book she quotes Francis Bacon in one scene, and that is very much intentional. It is. I love to lay these little threads that people can follow. They can follow those threads right out of the comic book page, right down some rabbit hole in the internet until they just lose their mind and realize, it's 4 in the morning. I need to go to bed.
Which happens to Adam and I all the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's my life. So
The Freemasons, they study Francis Bacon's work a lot. He was obsessed with the number 13. And no one was more obsessed with the number 13 than Sarah. She believed it held a lot of power, a lot of mystical power, and she put that number throughout the house as many opportunities as she could get. And I don't think that was random. I don't think it was just a design choice or like a preference, like, I
Right.
really like number 13. I'm going to spread it around like I would the color blue on the walls. No, I think that those rooms are meant to hold some kind of strength that only she fully understood.
Yeah. And see, that's what I was going to ask is, in some of the research we did, it hinted toward the fact that she was potentially a Mason. And like you said, at the time in the US, women weren't allowed to be in a Masonic lodge or anything like that. And I'm not sure if that's changed now. I know I have a friend who is a Freemason, and his lodge has no women in it. So I don't know if that's changed in the US or if it's stayed the same. But in a lot of what we were looking up, I came to believe that she probably was either a Freemason from, like you said, France or something like that, or that she had learned so much about it that she adopted that into her architecture and what she did. Her secrecy around the building of the house, it makes me think of the Coral Castle in Florida, where he built that whole castle by himself, but nobody knows how he did it because he kept the place walled off, and they think
he worked at night.
Yeah. And they think there was some type of acoustic, like a harmonic resonance that allowed him to lift the things. And he came out and said, I learned the secrets of the Egyptians. And so then that makes me wonder if some of the things that we don't know about Sarah, that maybe her builders didn't say, or that she didn't even tell them, is the reason behind some of it may have that deep mystical meaning that if we figured out, that house would be a power source for something. Would it open, because this is Graveyard Tales, I have to ask this question, would it open some type of dimensional slip, or would it thin the veil between us and the spiritual side, and we could see the paranormal more? And you mentioned it too. There's a lot of history about the spirits there. So I was going to see if you wanted to. I know Matt is one of the things Matt said is, I want to know some ghost stories that we maybe didn't cover.
The little factoids that you don't get when you watch the show about it, or see the episode of The Unexplained, or you hit a clickbait article, that little thing. But to touch on where Adam was going, and something you talked about earlier, Josh, was she said she knew that was the spot. That's where the house was going to go. Nowhere else would do. So it always made me think that it was more than just, this is a really pretty place. I really love this property, or the view, or the weather, that there was some type of energy there that she tapped into, or at least could feel, to say, this is the spot, because this is where the energy is. This is the place that I'm looking for to do this project.
I'm so excited for you guys to read Volume 2. Oh my God. This is exactly what Volume 2 is all about.
Oh, perfect.
So Volume 2 is very much going to go into why here. And there's going to be, again, we're going to meet a few new people who are going to kind of give us their theories. These characters are going to be our way into this discussion, because Sarah is so secretive and so private. It doesn't make sense in the story of the comic book series for her to just kind of like come out with these things. So other people have to kind of catch on to it and follow that string. And I believe that the place, the house, the location is important. I believe that, and here's the thing, so funny, like as you discover things, especially on the internet, other people, that they might share your opinion about one aspect of it, but every single time they do, and they feel strongly about that aspect, they try to use that to deny all the other aspects. And I'm like, I think you're wrong. I think a lot of this coexists, right? They're like, oh, she was really into Freemasonry. not ghosts. Oh, she was, not into Freemasonry. She was only doing this to save her life because she thought she was cursed. I'm like, why can't both things be true, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
so a big part of volume 2 is going to talk about. I'm going to keep it spoiler free, but for the most part, the theme is going to be about her having chosen this place and constructed this in a specific way because she feels that this is a spot where the veil between the spirit world and our world is very thin, and that through the energy that the house can produce through its nonstop construction, she is able to. That's the thing about these ghosts in my story. The ghosts are not necessarily the villains. They, as tormented spirits, they can torment the living, right? So they are the bad guys. But she doesn't view them that way. What she wants is to keep them away from us and to keep them at peace, right? So she's building this literal house for them in this one specific place where the veil is thin, where she can push them through that veil onto the other side of it and then keep them there as long as she keeps adding on and keep building and constantly feeding you this energy that's required for this to work. And I in this version of the story is going to it's going to go into the 1906 earthquake, one of the biggest earthquakes that America's ever felt, that ran right through San Jose, and it split the house in half, tore 7 stories of it down, and almost killed her. And I just love to play with this idea of what if all of this energy that's being pushed in one direction, in one location, and what if all of these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of spirits keep getting collected into one place? What happens if suddenly all that energy flips the doors open the other direction, pouring out at once? And that is where volume 2 is going to get real fun.
I'm looking forward to
that. I'm really trying to level it up because volume 1 is a slow burn. For those who haven't read it, I remember when the reviews came out for number 1, people were like, "Ooh, this is interesting. All right, he's slowing it down. This isn't an in-your-face horror. I'm not sure where this is going yet. Interesting, some mysterious vibes towards the end." And then you read the reviews and they get to issue 3 and they're like, "Oh my God, it's crazy. Stuff's happening every second. I don't know." It was just wild. And it made me personally so happy that that the reviewers were kind of like, they're following the pacing that I was trying to do. And it's been tough. I've been volume 1 was really successful, and I'm so lucky. It sold out within 2 weeks of its the trade paperback sold out within 2 weeks of its release. And now, I've been writing volume 2. It's taking me longer because I'm in my head about it. I want it to be really good. I'm so scared now that there's so many eyes on it. Now that I know exactly the number of people who are reading,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh geez, like that's you're starting to get into the numbers where not everybody can like it. Somebody's going to push back. There's going to be people who hate it. There's people that think the volume 2 doesn't live up to volume 1. It's just it's scary.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Just don't pull a George R. Martin. Like 10 years, we're like, I'm halfway done. Like, wait, what?
You said you talked about her continuing to build the house to appease the spirits, and that brings up something that we've talked about before. Is if you get in a place that is supposedly haunted and construction is being done, it seems to stir up the activity at a house. And one of the theories that I've heard and that we've talked about is it's because the paranormal lives in the liminal spaces, the in-between spaces. So if you take a house that's in construction, it's in between. It's in between the starting point and the ending point. So if it's in construction, it's always in the liminal space. So you see ghosts on stairwells a lot because that is a liminal space in between one floor and another. And in the Winchester Mystery House, I know there's a lot of stairways that go nowhere. There's doors to nothing. Open the wrong door and you fall flat on your face somewhere. So it makes me think that she was capitalizing on the in-between space, the liminal space, to not necessarily trap or confuse the spirits, as some people have said, but kind of your thought is to give energy to, or to bring spirits to that place. Because if it's always being built, it's always a huge liminal space. And so I think, in my opinion, I think that's one of the reasons why she didn't want to stop building. Is if she stopped building, then it was no longer an in-between space.
That's well said. First of all, that was perfect. I agree. I agree with that. There's also this idea, um, so which I think is very much in the same vein, and it really kind of occurred to me when we were approaching the centennial of the house. So Sarah died. Sarah died 100 years ago as of September, and the house is kind of celebrating this big centennial. And there's a lot of discussion. They talk about the house being 100 years old, and I know that the house is a lot older than 100 years old. So it's always really interesting to me. And I spoke to the house about this, and I said, "Why are you telling people the house is 100 years old? It's so much older than that. Why is this a centennial? You're talking. It's more of a celebration of Sarah's death than it is the house." And they said, "Well, when do you consider a house to be born?" And I said, I don't know. I guess when it's done being built." They said,
Yeah.
"Exactly." The house it was always in flux. It was never done. It was
Yeah.
incomplete. It was always incomplete. They didn't stop working on it until the day she died. That's the day that they laid their hammers down. And wherever state that house happened to be in at that moment is the state it remains in to this very day. They said, "It's done. The house is complete." And so that's this idea that for decades, she lived there, but it was an incomplete house. It was a work in progress. It was nothing but liminal space in that context. And I love that. I think there's a lot of I think there's something very interesting about that. And I also think that the power that holds, this idea that was never quite done. I think that lingers, because Sarah, when she died, in her heart, the house wasn't done either.
Mm-hmm.
That house is will always be unfinished to some degree, and maybe that's why those spirits remain. Maybe
I
that's
think
why,
so. Yeah.
to this day, when I show up at the house, the people who work there, like the tour guides and the people who are kind of other than tour guides, they have people that just kind of plan throughout the house to make sure you don't leave the chosen track, that you don't go off the tour and get lost somewhere. And when I was there, they were really excited to come run up to me and be like, "Hey, are you the writer? Are you the guy who's telling the story of the house in the comic books?" I was like, "Yeah, it's nice to meet you." They're like, "Do you have a minute?" I'm like, "Absolutely, for you, of course." And they they would say, yeah, so I need to tell you everything that's ever happened to me since I've worked here." And I'm like, "All right, sure." And it's just it's crazy. These people who work there every day, they've got stories, man. They feel like, one person was like, "I almost quit after the first month because I was so terrified." There's just so many things. And it was really interesting hearing these stories from multiple people who have a lot of similarities. Like, the things that happen to this employee are very similar to the things that happen to this employee. And it's got to be just a big part of the jobs for them to just continually talk about it, because no one's going to quite understand what they go through at work every day except for each other.
Right.
Right.
And I don't care what anybody says, you can debunk away, but man, there is a century of stories like that. Everybody, when Sarah was alive, everybody always wondered what was going on behind those walls. Everybody wanted to see inside that house. The day she died, people couldn't wait. They're like, "When do I get to see what was going on inside that house?" And that curiosity that draws all these people to that house, here we are 100 years later, and we're still talking about it. People are still traveling to it. They're coming from around the world because they still want to see what's going on behind those walls in that house. It's almost like it never stopped. It's almost like
Yep.
Sarah's still there and it's still under construction, because the people's desire to see what's going on in there hasn't changed since when she was alive. That's incredible. I don't know very many places that have that kind of power over.
No.
Oh yeah.
Still
Yeah.
putting energy into the house too by doing that. That everybody that comes there with that desire is feeding energy into that house, and I think that adds to not only it being a liminal space, a continuous liminal space. Because like you said, it wasn't done. It was never completed. So the house, the people that work there may say it was finished on the day she died because nothing else was added to it. But in reality, that house will never be finished. And until the day it falls down, it will be a liminal space.
Yeah. Yeah. They just finished the construction at her death. They didn't complete the house.
Right.
And they had no instructions for the next day, so they didn't know what they would have done to complete it.
Yeah. Even if you said, well, I'm going to do some additions to it and finish it up, that's not finishing the house. Only Sarah knows how to finish the house.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. I love that house. I love that story. I think it has, I love hauntings in general. I love the history and the stories behind them. Some of them are just absolutely mind blowing. And some of the experiences people there's places out there that are, it's incredible the things that people have documented and seen, but there is nothing else in the world that's quite like the Winchester Mystery House. It is so unique, and it's always going to be that way as long as people can keep going there and can keep seeing it. It's always going to kind of stand apart from everything else, and it's responsible for so much of our entertainment as horror fans too. Stephen King's Rose Red was inspired by that house. Edgar Allan Poe was inspired by that house going way back. Shirley Jackson's Haunting of Hill House was inspired by that house. Disney's Haunted Mansion. It spawned an entire subgenre of fiction of this American Gothic haunted mansion. All those stories really, they stem from one real life place and real life thing that happened. And for me to kind of get to be part of that legacy to help tell that story in a way that's considered respectful by the actual estate, man, I'm so lucky.
Yep.
So Josh, if you will, tell us what was one of the wildest paranormal experiences you were told about, and while you were there, did you have any experiences?
So one of the coolest things is that for the longest time, there's always been multiple people who come out of that house having seen a ghost apparition. There's been a ton of like small poltergeist activity in the house, pianos being played, people being touched, things like that. There's not a whole lot of items in the house to this day that could really get moved much, but there's definitely been chairs that have flipped and rocking chairs that have moved, things like that. But one of the strongest things that numerous people have seen, is they have been able to see a particular ghost so well. And there are other ghosts too. There are other spirits that people have actually caught on camera. There's been both like physical lit forms, almost like a fog taking shape, a mist. And then there's also been like shadow people that have been documented in the house. But there's one particular ghost that's been seen for ages, and he's seen so strongly people can describe him in great detail. And he's usually seen in the basement. He's often been seen pushing a wheelbarrow. And it wasn't until that they were going through all these old archives and they had found this photograph of these construction crew that worked on the house, and they decided to blow that picture up and hang it in the mansion, that they started realizing that all these stories about this ghost were all the same person, because what they started seeing was this constant pattern of people coming out saying, that's him right there, pointing to the picture, pointing to this one particular worker. His name is Clyde. And that is, in my opinion, just grants it so much validity that not only are multiple people in modern times, in the times of the internet, and the times of photography, and the times of all these things, can agree on, like, that's the guy I saw, but they've been doing that for decades. I mean, decades and decades, people have seen Clyde in that house. That's incredible. And it wasn't, this story, this lore of, oh yeah, and the man in the hat, the man with the wheelbarrow, the man with the hat and the wheelbarrow in the basement. That holds a lot of weight in as far as storytelling goes and passing down from generation to generation. But when real people in real time recognize a photograph separately from each other without having known that photograph was of him, that's pretty hard to debunk. Um, uh, Another one of my favorite stories about trying to debunk the house is Harry Houdini. Um, Very famously visited the house on a tour of trying to debunk ghost stories. And at the time, spiritualism was it was very popular, and then it was very contested. Reason being was like, it was post Civil War. Pretty much everyone knew someone who had died, right? So they
Mhm.
had lost a loved one. Everyone had. And it was so tragic, and there was so much grief and sorrow in this country at the same time that spiritualism really rose up. It became popular because people loved the idea of being able to reconnect with somebody they'd lost. And it was such a collective mental presence. Everybody felt that way and could agree on something. And that is, they wish they could talk to their loved one again. And because of that, it was seances were happening all over the country. And a lot of people, a lot of opportunists stepped up to try to figure out how they could profit from this. And Harry Houdini, he saw the evil and the greed in that, and he said, "I'm going to go and I'm going to prove all these fakes." And it wasn't so much out of spite of the supernatural as it was protecting people from scams.
Right.
Mhm.
But it became, he was so good at it, he was so smart, and he knew, being a magician, he knew all the tricks, right? So he could see how things were done. He could see the magic, the tricks behind the magic. And on that tour, everybody said, "Shh, you should go to the Winchester House. Like, see for yourself. That's a real haunting. That's what it's really like." And he hadn't seen a real haunting yet, so he went. And by the time he came out of that house, he had thrown his hands in the air and said, "That's it. I don't know what's going on inside that house.
Hmm.
I can't debunk this. Whatever's happening there, I can't say what it is, but it's real." And that's just, I think that's one of the coolest. It's so cool. Um, I personally, so I haven't spent enough time in there to have, I think, proper experiences, but I have had a couple little things. Um, very, very little, but one of them's kind of cool. I'll tell you guys about it. Well, first off, so when I was giving that tour through the dark with flashlights and everything, and keep in mind, when I'm in that house, it's not like I'm ready to be spooked. I'm excited to be scared. That's not my vibe. When I'm in that house, all I want to do is spend every second I can in every single room, absorbing every detail. I'm there looking through very analytical eyes. I'm like, so that's what that molding looks like. I got to remember to take a picture of that or describe that to the artist for issue 4 for this. Like I'm looking at everything. And if a room looks particularly creepy or foreboding, I'm even more obsessed with it. Oh,
Mhm.
what is it about this room that has this? I want to pick it apart so I can recreate it, so I can recreate that feeling in a comic book. And for me to want to get out of a room, it would take a lot to drag me out of a room in that house. I want to be there
Mhm.
more than anything. But there were certain rooms while we were going through this house that I was like, I can't stand it in here. I feel like I can't breathe. I feel like I'm suffocating. Like this room wants to squeeze me out of it like a tube of toothpaste, and I just can't wait to get to the other side where that door is and get out. And I couldn't always put my finger on why. I I would look around the room because I would recognize it in myself and go, "What am I doing? Why do I feel this way? Like, this isn't like me." Especially here. Like, I need to stop and try to take, try to recognize this for what it is. And this is all happening, quietly in my head. But I had a lot of ghost hunting podcasts and things like that. People with me, and one of them they had brought this woman who was extremely susceptible to paranormal. Uh, I don't know if she considers herself a medium, but she seems damn close to one to me. And
A sensitive, at least.
very, yeah. And so she had a recorder with her, and she was just very quietly saying everything that she was experiencing as she would move from room to room. And she was just a little bit behind me. So, I would enter a room first and other people would, and eventually she would come in. And what I kept finding was super fascinating to me was, and I kept caught it by coincidence, it was just an accident. I would overhear her talking into it. And whenever I was feeling that way in certain rooms, she was basically saying out loud into her recorder, word for word, what I was feeling.
Oh,
And
wow.
man, it was so validating to think, okay, well, I'm not alone. And it's not, I'm looking around the room saying, well, there's nothing particularly creepy about this room. There's nothing like, oh, this one's darker, so I'm scared. No, it's not like that. It's something completely different. And she was feeling that same way and expressing it, into a recorder. And I thought that was really interesting. And one of the rooms that I felt I had the hardest time in was a room that was never finished. There's not even walls up. It's just kind of a bunch of slatted boards, and it's the secret room that comes off of the seance room. So Sarah, there are a lot of people it's so funny. You read through, I love it because I'll dig through the internet and I'll go, you got most of this wrong. but like, there's a lot of people that they've just kind of passed the tail down and they started adding their own little details,
Sure.
and like, you can't do those aren't accurate. Like, for example, people will say, at midnight she would go to the seance room to get her instructions from the ghost and what to build the next day, and she would always be in the seance room for exactly 2 hours. From midnight to 2 a.m. And I'm like, you don't know that. In fact, nobody knows that because of a very specific reason. Sarah was always seen going into the seance room. And then the next time you saw her, she'd be in a different spot in the house. She was never once seen coming out of the seance room. That was a one-way door. And it always blew everybody's minds, everybody who wasn't in the know. Well, she had a secret exit out of the seance room that she had specifically built for her. So when you walk in that room, there's 2 doors in the room. You go in the one. When you turn to the left, there's another door. But if you were to open that door and step through it, you fall 3 stories. You fall into a sink in a kitchen way far down below.
Oh, wow.
You're not leaving that way.
I'd heard about that, but I didn't realize that door was off of the seance room.
Yeah. So there's a couple doors with drop offs. There's one that goes right off the side of the house, so you'll fall outside. But there's a door where you'll fall inside, and that's inside the seance room. And then there's these sort of like big, they look like coat closet cabinets, doors. And that's where people are like, oh, if you open these doors, you'll be able to count all of the coat hanger hooks, and you'll realize there's 13 of them in the room. But if you open another set of them, there's actually a secret exit that she would leave through. Since then, because you can continue wandering through the house through that exit, they've actually turned it into part of the tour. So now, in traditional Sarah fashion, the only way on the tour that you leave the seance room is the way she did. So they've actually put steps in now, so you can just and the door's always open. So it just feels like you can walk right out. But at the time, it was very secretive. You can find a closet and come out. Well, when you go through that secret doorway, the room on the other side is completely unfinished. And it stands out right away when you see, because everything else around it is very finished. And you're like, wow, there's just a secret room. There's not even walls up. Like, it's very strange. But it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, it's this room that nobody else would ever see. It's a room that was probably constructed in complete secrecy by only a handful of workers. And I wouldn't doubt that she wouldn't waste her time on furnishing it if it was only meant for her secret exit. And she was like that. She would put her trust in certain workers to do certain secret projects for her. And you'll see that in volume 1 of the comic book series when they put they hide the vaults in the wall. That's one of my other favorite stories about that. But yeah, that particular room, I don't know what it is about it, man, but there is something about that room. That room is terrifying. I don't know what it is, and it's not a visual thing. It's a feeling, and I don't know if it has partially to do with the fact that it's so unfinished that it just there's more power to it, or there's more presence there. I'm not sure, but it's I felt it very strongly.
The fact that you're not getting like visual cues for the creepy feelings and stuff, to me, adds some validity to it, because if you're going in a room and you're seeing quote unquote spooky stuff and you get creeped out by that, then that's your brain saying, oh, this is a creepy spot. But if it's just another room and you're getting that feeling, then that, to me, adds a little bit of validity, because it's like, well, it's not the visual cues. It's not the, oh, hey, there's a skull on the wall. And, it doesn't look like Adam's recording room with skulls everywhere and all that stuff. It's not creepy. And like you said, the secret room that you felt the most in, that again could be that in between, but since it's not finished, and it's a vortex within a vortex, an unfinished house with an unfinished room. And maybe she knew that, and maybe that's one reason that it wasn't finished and it's off of the seance room. It adds to the power of the seance room because it's right there and it's a liminal space. I don't think people put enough stock into the liminal areas, because every bit of research that Matt and I have done, it seems to be the in-between spots that have the most paranormal activity. And I think people miss it by not looking into the history of things. Because like you said, I love the history behind a haunted place. I love what was the history of this land or this building prior to these stories, or something like, you get a better understanding of the haunting. And I think it will help you piece together information that you can then validate the hauntings. Right. And I think, you know, your feelings there are very valid to me, since you're not seeing something that creeps you out, and you could be slightly sensitive too, like that person, and just not know it.
It's like, so I mean, I've definitely throughout my life, and I've had some experiences. Actually, I have a lot of experiences in this building I'm in right now. So this building's over 100 years old, and it's in one of the it's in the historic district. So we decided to put our headquarters, instead of getting a nice office building like everybody else in the city. We're like, let's take that dump that's been abandoned for a long time and let's try to fix it up.
That's something Matt and I would do.
Yeah, exactly.
And this particular area is, it's insane. So if you guys haven't heard of him before, there's a paranormal investigator named Steve Shippey. And Steve, he's got first he went on it. He made about 13 documentaries independently of all these different paranormal investigations that he did. They're on Prime Video and they're phenomenal. And then he got picked up by the Travel Channel on Discovery Network, and they really, really loved his stuff, and they wanted him to be the face of their show, Haunting the Heartland.
Oh, yeah.
And then he went on from there. They wanted more, so they did this docuseries about the true story that inspired this movie Scream. And now he's doing even more with them, and they just love him because what they've realized is that he's like the real deal. Well, Steve believes that there is a one particular haunted hub in America, and all of his documentaries, they all take place within a 20-mile radius of that one haunted hub. And that's where I live. That is where this building is. It's right smack in the middle. So right next door, the building next door to this one has a documentary about it. The the building kitty corner from us has a documentary about it. The library, a couple blocks that way, has a documentary about it. It's they're all paranormal investigations.
That's cool.
It's like insanely haunted area. So this particular spot in Michigan is like it predates like westward expansion. It predates all of Michigan cities. It predates Detroit by a long shot. So this was all Native American tribes that settled down here first. And there's a particular reason for I'm going to do the Michigan thing. So you put your hand up and you look at the crevice between your thumb and your first finger. That's this big, huge bay coming off the Great Lakes. And then from that, you look at all these cool little creases that run down your thumb. Those are really big, beautiful rivers. And this is Saginaw, Michigan. Saginaw River comes right off of here. So it was a great place for tribes to set up. And then what happened was all these kind of Europeans started coming this way, and they started setting up here because they realized, oh man, we're off the lake. There's tons and tons and tons of forest up here. It's all forest. So a lot of loggers were sending their wood down the river, and they'd be up here just lumbering away. Fur traders, like this was just a hub. So this little area, Saginaw, became one of the very first like westernized cities in this area, long before Michigan was settled, long before it was a state. And it was a big mix of the Saginaw tribe that lived here and these Westerners who were making a living here. And this particular city became like It became just a hot spot for fun. So like at the end of the season, when you collected your money and you were done working on trees for a while, you would come down here, and all this little downtown area, all these buildings used to be old brothels, and you would just be flush with cash. Everybody be spending money, and there would just be drinks and prostitutes galore. And as a result, every year bandits would come through here and they would raid the town and they would shoot and kill everyone. And they would take all of the money that was so flush here. So even this building was it's right along the river. I can throw something out the window and it'll go in the water. And in between this building and the water are train tracks. So it's double strong. And those train tracks, they've been here forever. They're some of the first train tracks ever built in this area. And so the train would come through here along the river, and boats would come along the river. And this was a grocer's warehouse. So all these groceries would get unloaded here. That's not exactly the type of place you rob. Give me all your lettuce.
Right.
So this place has in it an original, over 100-year-old vault downstairs. Big old vault with the door, everything. Huge. They protect their stuff. On top of that, there's hidden drop downs where, like, if you see the people coming, you can take your cash and you can drop it through the secret slots in the floor, and it would take it down into a secret room in the basement that if you went down in the basement, you wouldn't even know it was there.
Oh, wow.
They're still here. They're still here in this building. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
But yeah, stuff happens in this building all the time. It's nuts. And I eventually met Steve, and it was really cool because we hit it off right away. And he loves this area. He loves the city. And he'd never gotten to be inside this building before. So I was the first person to get to kind of bring him in and show him around. And he knows the whole area. He's literally done documentaries about every building around it. So that was kind of cool. And then, eventually he confided in me as we started working together on some projects. He's like, I really want to open a haunted museum right here in Saginaw. And I have been collecting for about 15 to 20 years, like all these items that I've taken from my investigations from these houses. I've removed like cursed objects and possessed dolls, and I've done like all this stuff, and I have everything. It's like I want to put it all in one place, and I want to put up a bunch of protections. And he's like, I'd love to have you involved. I'd love to have you do some artwork and do some graphic design and help me with signage and marketing, so I can do this big grand opening. And we did, and we worked on it for months with him, and now it's open. It's awesome. I can see it out my window. It's super close.
That's cool.
He picked the most haunted building you can find to put the museum in, and that is the one like still standing original funeral home and mortuary in the city, like the oldest one in the city.
Oh,
so
wow.
Of course it's notoriously haunted. While he's setting up the museum, he eventually is like, yeah, once I set it up, I want to do a documentary about the actual building. So my next documentary video will be about the museum, but mostly about the haunting of the museum. And that will be what'll kick off the opening. That's genius, man. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
He's just trying to move his stuff in. He's not ready to shoot or film anything. He's not even trying. All this crazy shit starts happening to him. Oh my God. It's amazing the stories he had. I could talk about that forever. There's a lot of stuff going on around here. But to bring it back to Winchester Mystery House, I had one weird thing that was kind of interesting, and I don't put a ton of stock in it, but it's so weird. So I was walking through the house and I was taking photos for reference later for the comic. And when I went back through, I was downstairs, I was leaving the house, I was going through, and my camera roll, there was a picture in my camera roll that I hadn't taken. And it was sandwiched between two photos I very much remember taking. So I just assumed it was a slip of the finger and an accidental photo I'd taken. And based on the background, I could pretty much piece together what room it was in the house from what was before and after it. But the photo has a rocking chair in it. And the rocking chair just looks off. You look at it and go, what? Why does the rocking chair look so weird? And if you look at it really close, you can see all of its 3D form. And then it looks old and worn and ragged. Like there's some fabric on it, but the fabric is like torn and shredded and hanging off of it. And then if you follow your eyes around the side of this rocking chair, there's a point at which the rocking chair, it just fades into nothing and then it disappears and then it comes back together. And it is the weirdest thing. And you look at it, and so I'm staring at this going, well, it's just got to be a motion blur effect, Like I hit the button with my thumb as I was walking. But what's odd is that that happens when things are really out of focus and like and it's really blurred. Rocking chair, while it looks off, like it doesn't belong in the room and something's really strange about it, and part of it definitely disappears. The rest of it's really solid. Like you know it's there.
Yeah.
And I had showed some people downstairs. I was like, "Where is this rocking chair that I took this picture of?" And they're like, "Nope, not here." I'm like, "No, the photo's from here." They're like, "That's not in this house." And I'm like, "No, I'm sorry, we got off the wrong foot." Like the picture is definitely in the house. I know it's in the house. I took it in the house. I didn't realize I took it, but I did. And it was, I could show the timestamp. It was like an hour ago. But what room is it in the house? They're like, that rocking chair is not in this house. And they were like, look at it. It's all ragged mess. They're like, this whole house, take one note, one thing you can take away from it, everything is pristine. And that's true. Like it's Victorian era furniture, but it is spotless. It looks brand spanking new.
Yeah.
Everything in that house is beautiful, gorgeous. They don't let it collect dust. They don't let anything look dirty. It is beautiful the way that Sarah would have kept it. And it's not meant to look like a spooky haunted house. It's meant to be. So it's yeah, I'm like, okay, I understand what you're saying. Yes, that chair looks out of place, but it's here. I could show you. I could figure out what room it is by looking at the background and looking at the 2 photos. They're like, let's go up there right now. So we did. There was no rocking chair there.
Oh man,
fucking weird.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was so strange to me, and so I was. And it's one of those things where you just kind of write off. You're like, I can't explain it, but it's just a photo of a chair at the end of the day. But it stuck with me so strongly that I did this. I wrote this other comic, this one-shot story called The 100-Year Curse. It takes place in modern times at the house while these people are going through a tour, and one girl on the tour named Jade, she starts seeing things in the house, and she starts, when she touches certain things or she's in certain rooms, she's getting these flashback sequences, and it's the house kind of revealing its memories to her. And so when those memories start to bleed into reality, she's not sure where she is anymore or what year it is. If it's 1900 or if it's 2022. So like there's these moments in there, and one of them I really kick it off. It gets stronger by showing a rocking chair in the story, and she points to this rocking chair. She's like, "Look at this rocking chair. It looks so strange. It seems so out of place." And her friend's like, "What rocking chair? There's no rocking chair in this room." And for those who've read that comic, that is entirely put there because of the rocking chair that I have this photo of.
Yeah.
I had to kind of sneak in the story.
It made me wonder if it was like since you don't remember taking the picture and everything, it makes me wonder if it was one of those, like there was a slight time slip that the spirit allowed that picture to be captured to tell you something or to try to show you something.
Yeah.
And here's what used to be here, or here's what I experienced at some, like, are you supposed to learn something from that? Is there something that you'll find out later that involves this chair or a rocking chair like that? Not to put any weird paranoia in your head, but you might end up with something that explains that, maybe not this year, but somewhere down the line.
Right. I think I wouldn't be surprised if the house does little things like that all the time, and that people just don't know it, or they catch this glimpse of it, but then they go on with they leave their tour and they go on with their life, and they'll never fully understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And like if somebody was there who could take all those little pieces and put them together like a puzzle, they'd get a picture of something much more than we know. I think it's very cool. I think there's something very much to it. And that's how it is, right? That's how the real paranormal is. It's these moments in time that are there that feel like they shouldn't be, that aren't meant to be, and you're getting a glimpse of something else. Different time, a different place, a person that no longer exists. Like all this is just kind of overlapping, and you're just happen to be in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And as these rational human beings that have all declared, well, this is what's real and this is what's dreamed and this is what's, the world and this is what isn't. This is what's science and this is what's supernatural. Like we're just so boxed in and black and white that we don't know what to do with those experiences. So our brains just tuck them away so that we can move on. Because if we dwell on too much, we'll lose our minds because we won't know what's real anymore. And that's sad because I feel like we're only using this small percentage of our brain. And what if when those moments happen, it was just another little part of our brain lit up? If there was some electrical energy that was sparking that allowed us to see things that we're always meant to see, and we're just can't,
Right.
we can't. You know what I'm saying? I feel like I had, and I will not betray her confidence because I can't do that to any human being. But I just came from a really big convention in New York where I had a big, massive, huge backdrop behind me of the Winchester Mystery House. And I had this cool little stand, and people could just come up and they could take pictures with this giant piece of art, and they could just talk to me about the comics, and they can just hang out and chat. And it was really nice. And that's why my voice is so rough, is because I spent a week just talking about this with people. And I met the most fascinating person. And she works in a dementia ward. And here we have these people whose brains are just crumbling, and all these electrical impulses that are going through their brains, they're not firing on all cylinders. They're going places they're not supposed to. They're reacting in different ways. And she has had more paranormal experiences on that dementia ward than anyone. She has seen things and witnessed things and watched them. The things that you easily write off to as dementia, you start to realize, man, maybe it's not. They talk about the other people in the room with you. Maybe they're seeing other people in the room with you.
Yep.
And when they keep starting to repeat certain names that aren't people that they knew from their past, that aren't memories that are stuck in their head, that they're people that are around them that they talk to every day, that interact with them, and then you're with these people long enough to start to see the patterns. You start to wonder, maybe this part of the brain that's in reality here with us is starting to crumble, but maybe there's another part that's opened up. And
yep. We actually talked about that. Matt and I did in some episode. I can't remember which one it was, but my great grandmother went through dementia, and I helped take care of her as she was dying. And one of the things that we talked about is they say, and whenever you're close to dying, that you get visits from relatives to kind of help ease you into death. And one of the things that we were talking about is, what if dementia patients, we call it dementia, but it's because we don't understand that the parts of your brain that aren't here anymore are living in the afterlife, and you switch between the two. And so when you're back here in the part of your brain that is here, you're recalling stuff that you did or witnessed from the part of your brain that's in the afterlife. And dementia can be a very slow build, or it can be pretty quick. And on the slow ones, what if just little pieces are moving over to whatever the afterlife is? And the more that gets over there, the less you're in this world and the more you're in that world, but you're still able to communicate back and forth between the two parts of your brain. And that's why we as humans as fully in this world people don't understand what they're witnessing on the other side. And we're calling it dementia. But maybe it's just a slower progression into the afterlife than what a lot of people experience as just a quick bloom. There, you're in it. What if it's like an hourglass that's slowly draining you to the afterlife, but because the strand of sand that goes from one side to the other is still connected as it's falling, information is able to travel back and forth. And there's been people talk about, like you said, these people are talking to their relatives that are in the room. And you're like, no, they're not here. My great grandmother did that. My great grandmother talked to her husband who had passed away already. And we're like, no, grandpa's not here. Yeah, he is. He's talking to me. And you're like, don't know whether they're lucid or not. Maybe they are fully lucid. They're telling the truth, but we can't see it because our brains are fully here and theirs are not. Theirs are split.
That's what's so fascinating about that theory too, which I think is perfect explanation, is that one of the things that has been most documented throughout history that we can all kind of agree on is that uh, spirits, whenever there's these stories of ghosts, they're oftentimes seen reliving different moments from their past, right? So you might say like, oh wow, well, like this one particular ghost is always seen in the kitchen
Mhm.
cooking, right? So like a ghost is kind of trapped in these different moments in its own history as time, right? Its own life. So even when a person with dementia is reliving parts of their past as well, like say maybe they're really stuck on like this car that they keep talking about. It's a car that they had when they were a teenager. And
Mhm.
then, in when we talk about ghosts, like we might see a ghost always hanging around that one bus stop that they were at when they were a kid. It, what if they're doing the same thing? What if those moments that so they've got one foot in on either side of this veil, and that kind of ghost side of them is the side that's reliving these old memories in their brain the
Mm-hmm.
same way that a ghost who's fully on that side does.
Right.
And then at the same time, they like you said, they've got the other loved ones around them. They've got people they don't even know around them. They've got, they're able to interact with people we can't see. So they're doing both. They're basically they're living the life of a ghost while they're still alive. I think that's absolutely fascinating.
Mhm.
Makes you wonder like what we as living people are capable of is seeing and interacting with if we were able to tap into that the same way that they are in this kind of mental decline. It's oh yeah, I think it's heartbreaking too at times. I was in a movie. So for those who haven't seen my IMDb, I've got a big weird scattering of movie credits. Like there's like, oh, there's like producing credits and then writing credits and then there's acting and all this. And I acted in this one movie called Schism, and I'm pretty proud of that film. It went on to win a bunch of awards, but it was about specifically about dementia, and they shot that movie on site at a real dementia ward, and they had to like clear it out a part of it so that we were all of us the cast were escorted through functioning parts of the dementia ward to get to the wing that we were filming in. And so we of course had to like have all these passcodes to get in through doors, and then we would have to get through parts of it very quickly and then close it because all of these residents were right there in front of you. And we would have to be escorted in case the residents kind of acted up. And it was such a humbling experience. Every day on the way to set, I'd be walking through a dementia ward, and people would, they'd be coming up to me in the dementia ward. Residents would be mistaking me for people in their past, or confused about who I was, or some of them they seemed to know me immediately
Mm-hmm.
in ways that they couldn't possibly know me. It was mind blowing, and every time when this happened, it was startling, and at the same time, it was really fascinating. So I looked into them, and I've seen people in mental decline, and I've seen people on horrific drugs, and I've seen people on their way out, right when they're about to die, right, and you kind of like there's like a life that's kind of lost in them, in their eyes. These people, they did not have that.
Right.
Yes, I know that they were probably on their way out the door, and I know that they were deep into their dementia, and that's why they were there. But you looked at them, and they were looking back at you with so much clarity and confidence. They were so certain in what they were seeing and saying, uh, and even if you couldn't understand it. So even those that were so far gone that words were no longer words that we could recognize, you could tell there was intent in their voice,
Right.
Mhm.
and man, it just sticks with you. And I feel like there's so much we still don't know.
Yep. There is. And Matt and I talked just before getting on with you. did a Patreon, and we were talking about the fact that it's something we've mentioned many times in the past, but our ancestors were able to do so much more, like telepathically or whatever. And we have lost it because we are so busy and we're so technological that we don't delve into that part of the brain that worked with something telepathic. There were tribes that could telepathically communicate with other tribe members that were dozens of miles away and know where they were and when they were coming home and all this. And we have that innate ability, but only a few of us, a little smattering throughout the world, know how to tap into that. And those are the ones we call mediums or telepaths, because they know how to do that still, and we don't. And I think it's because we've gotten so busy in our advanced life with cell phones and all that takes up the part of our brain that the more, like, maybe we had more senses than we think we do, more than touch and smell and sight. And maybe we had telepathy and levitation or something that now we've lost.
The scary part is it's so exciting and fascinating thinking about the possibilities and what we're capable of. But I had a feeling we're just heading the other direction.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, like, damn, I feel like I'm getting dumber every day.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, kind of finish it up here, Josh. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and find your work and all that, and I'll get the links from you so that I can put it in the show notes. But why don't you tell everybody just kind of where they can find you, get in touch with you, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. So my handle on social media is always the same. It's Joshua Frantic, FARNTIC, all Joshua Frantic, all one word. So you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. I actually have, if you go to my TikTok, you're going to see a ton of like behind the scenes videos of me traveling to all these different conventions, and you'll see videos around this office even, and you'll see some videos of the Haunted Museum in Saginaw, Michigan here, and a bunch of other cool stuff. So there's like, if you're into nerd stuff and comic books and horror, oh my goodness, there's a ton of it. And then I'm the editor-in-chief of SourcePoint Press. You go to our website, sourcepointpress.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all those places. We do books and comics and graphic novels, and we also have games and all sorts of cool stuff. I'm very lucky. I get to travel around a lot. So if you ever want to reach out and just let me know where you're from, I'll let you know when I'm going to be in your area, because eventually I always make it there. This year I've been in Denver, Dallas, Calgary, Toronto, Boston, New York, LA, everywhere. So, and I'm not done. I just got back in New York. I'm getting ready to go to Orlando. And then after that, I'm on my way to be on the movie set of a film we're shooting based on one of our comics in Santa Fe. And then as soon as I leave there, I head to San Francisco. So my travel is not up yet. If you're into the comics, if you want to check out Winchester Mystery House, Volume 1 is out. It collects issues 1, 2, and 3. It covers about the first 10 years of the house. And there's also a one-shot comic out there called The 100-Year Curse. Unfortunately, it's sold out most everywhere. So Simon & Schuster sold out. Diamond Comic Distributors sold out. We're sold out. But Barnes & Noble sold out. But I think Amazon still has some left. I think they're down to like 20 copies. So if you act quick, you might be able to get your hands on one. And we got a second printing on the way, and then Volume 2 will come right after that. So there's more to come. So yeah, you can find us all over the internet, and if you can just Google me, and you'll find all sorts of stuff I've worked on.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for Volume 2, man. I'm stoked about getting to read that one, especially after our conversation tonight and everything we covered. And you said, "Well, just wait till Volume 2." I'm ready for it.
Yeah, that's right.
So I've done a lot of podcast interviews recently, but I could say I have said more about Volume 2 on your show tonight than I have anywhere else. So,
well, there you go. You're getting a sneak peek of what Volume 2 is going to entail.
Absolutely.
Graveyard Tales exclusive right here. So thank you, Josh, so much for taking time out of your day and coming on Graveyard Tales and talking with us about it. And nobody knows it. I'll go ahead and spill it here. We had to reschedule because we had some issues on our end. So I appreciate the flexibility to do that. And we're excited to get to put this up as part of our October Halloween month episodes. So really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Josh. It's been great talking to you. I can't wait till the day I get to meet you in person, brother.
Yeah, it's going to happen. We'll hang out. And thanks for having me. This was a blast. You guys are awesome.
We'll come up and tour your haunted building up there that you're in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So I hope that you enjoyed that interview and discussion with Josh. We can't thank Josh enough for coming on and being another episode here in our spooky month in October for Halloween month. And I mean, I just can't say enough. It's cool to know Josh, and it's awesome what he does.
Oh yeah. And what I think is so great is that it shows that if you're into spooky stuff, if you're into the paranormal, ghosts and whatnot, if that trips your trigger, and you want to be a creator, you don't have to put a microphone in front of your face to be an amazing creator in this genre.
Right.
Not all of us are Stephen King. Not all of us have, the guts to take up a microphone or even the desire. But so many other people out there have put their talents into this genre. And I think it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So thank you everybody for listening. Don't forget to check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can join our Facebook group. It is called The Graveyard. It is a great place to have discussions like this, to share personal experiences, and it's completely private. It's only within the group. No one there is going to poke fun of you. It's a safe place to share those type of stories and have fun. Go check out our website. It's graveyardpodcast.com. And there you can purchase Graveyard Tales merchandise. You can listen to the show, and you can become a patron. And when we mentioned earlier how important those Patreon donations came in, not just for this show, but just the previous shows and everything else we've done, because we couldn't have done it without you guys. So until next time, we'll save you a seat in the graveyard.
See you soon.